26-year-old Millie Monroe stared at her phone screen, watching the notification count climb higher with each refresh. Another comment, another share, another person who believed she was a monster who abandoned her twin daughters, Emma and Sophie, when they were just 4 years old. The viral social media post from her ex-husband Derek had already reached 50,000 shares in 3 days, painting her as the ultimate deadbeat mother who chose her selfish dreams over her children. But Millie had something Derek didn't know about: a manila envelope sitting in her kitchen drawer, sealed and untouched for 2 years. Inside were court documents, medical records, and official correspondence that would shatter every lie he'd told. She'd kept them as insurance, never imagining she'd need them to defend her reputation against a man who knew exactly what really happened that terrible winter of 2019. The truth was about to destroy everything Derek had built his new life on, and Millie was finally ready to let it.
Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you.
Millie Monroe's morning routine at her small apartment in Portland, Oregon, had become a careful dance around digital landmines. Phone notifications turned off, social media apps hidden in a folder labeled work stuff, email checked only when absolutely necessary for her job as a freelance graphic designer. It had been this way for 3 weeks now, ever since Derek's post went viral and turned her life into a public trial where she'd already been convicted. The coffee shop where she usually worked had become impossible after the barista recognized her from the screenshot Derek had posted, her old profile picture from their married days, smiling beside him at some forgotten barbecue. "Aren't you that mom who ran away?" the 19-year-old had asked, loud enough for half the cafe to hear. Millie had left her laptop bag behind in her rush to escape. Now she worked from her cramped studio apartment, the same space where she'd rebuilt her life from nothing after the divorce 3 years ago. The walls were covered with her design work: logos for small businesses, wedding invitations, concert posters, proof of the creative career Derek claimed she'd chosen over motherhood. What he didn't tell his 50,000 sympathizers was that she'd started this business out of necessity, not choice, when the custody arrangements left her completely broke. Her phone buzzed against the kitchen counter where she'd banished it during work hours. Despite her better judgment, she glanced over. A text from her younger sister, Hannah. "Mom saw the post. She's asking questions." Millie's stomach dropped. Their mother, Patricia, lived in a senior community in Arizona and wasn't particularly tech-savvy, but apparently someone had shown her Derek's viral story. The thought of explaining this mess to her 72-year-old mother, who still asked when Millie was going to work things out with Derek for the girls' sake, felt overwhelming. She'd managed to keep the real reasons for their divorce from her family, partly to protect the girls from family drama, and partly because the truth was so complicated that even she sometimes questioned her own memories. But Derek's public character assassination was forcing all those buried secrets back to the surface. The story he'd told was masterfully crafted, she had to admit. Derek had always been good with words. It's what made him successful in pharmaceutical sales and what had charmed her into marriage when she was just 21. His version painted a picture of a young mother who got bored with domestic life and decided to pursue her art career in another state, leaving him to raise their twin daughters alone while she found herself. He'd shared old photos of Emma and Sophie at birthday parties and school events where Millie was notably absent, though he conveniently left out the context for each absence. The comment section was brutal. "Selfish generation thinks motherhood is optional. Those poor babies deserve better. Hope she never gets them back." Some people had even tracked down her business website and left scathing reviews. What Derek's audience didn't know was that Millie saw Emma and Sophie every other weekend and had fought for more time during the custody hearing. They didn't know about the court-mandated supervised visits that had gradually evolved into overnight stays as she'd proven her stability. They didn't know that she lived in a studio apartment because every extra dollar went to child support and the girls' activities. Most importantly, they didn't know why she'd really left Phoenix.
The manila envelope in her kitchen drawer contained documents that Derek assumed had been destroyed in the flood that damaged her old apartment's storage unit. But Millie's lawyer had given her copies of everything, and she'd kept them in a waterproof case, insurance against a day she hoped would never come. Inside were medical records from Phoenix General Hospital dated December 15, 2019, police incident reports from the same night, text messages Derek had sent that were entered into evidence during their emergency custody hearing, screenshots of bank transactions that told a very different story than the one he was sharing online. But using those documents would mean revealing things she'd sworn to keep private for Emma and Sophie's sake. The girls, now 7 years old, had adjusted well to their life with Derek and his new girlfriend, Clara. They were happy, thriving in school, involved in dance classes and soccer. Destroying their father's reputation would devastate them, even if it cleared her name. Millie had spent 3 years believing that protecting her daughter's stability was worth more than protecting her own reputation. She'd endured the whispered conversations at school pickup, the way other mothers pulled their children closer when she approached, the assumption that she was somehow defective because she didn't have primary custody of her kids. But Derek had crossed a line by making their private family business into public entertainment. His viral post wasn't just damaging her reputation, it was creating a false narrative that Emma and Sophie would eventually read about their own mother. She couldn't let that stand. Her laptop chimed with a new email notification. The subject line made her blood run cold. Interview request, Portland Morning Show. Local media had found the story. This was about to get much worse. Millie walked to the kitchen drawer and pulled out the manila envelope. Her hands shook as she broke the seal she'd placed on it 2 years ago, when the divorce was finalized, and she'd promised herself she was moving forward, not looking back. The first document was a hospital discharge summary with her name at the top and a diagnosis code that brought back memories she'd worked hard to suppress. The second was a police report with Derek's signature at the bottom, filed at 11:47 p.m. on December 15, 2019, 3 hours after she'd been admitted to the emergency room. The third document was a text message thread, printed and notarized for court evidence. Derek's words, sent while she was unconscious in a hospital bed. "She's finally gone. Can't wait to tell Emma and Sophie that Mommy chose her art over them. This is better for everyone." Millie had left Phoenix not because she was selfish or bored with motherhood, but because staying would have destroyed her completely. The supervised visitations weren't a punishment for abandonment. They were protection while she recovered from what Derek had done to her during their marriage. But proving that would require more than just documents. It would require her to relive the worst period of her life in front of strangers, to expose her daughters to truth they were too young to understand, and to accept that the quiet life she'd built in Portland was about to disappear forever. The interview request email was still open on her screen, the cursor blinking in the reply field. Millie had a choice to make: continue letting Derek control the narrative, or fight back with the truth, regardless of the cost. She looked around her small apartment, at the artwork on the walls, the photos of Emma and Sophie on her desk, the life she'd built from scratch after losing everything. Then she looked back at the documents spread across her kitchen table. Evidence of a story that was far more complicated than social media could ever capture. For 3 years, she'd chosen silence, but Derek had just forced her hand, and he had no idea what he'd unleashed. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you.
The call came at 6:47 a.m. on a Thursday, jarring Millie awake from the first decent sleep she'd had in weeks. Unknown Phoenix number. Her heart immediately jumped to the worst-case scenario. Something had happened to Emma or Sophie. "Is this Millie Monroe?" The voice was crisp, professional, unfamiliar. "Yes, who is this?" "This is Janet Reeves from Sunset Elementary School. I'm the guidance counselor for Emma and Sophie Patterson. I'm calling because we've had some concerning incidents this week involving the girls, and I think we need to discuss what's happening at home." Millie sat up straight, fully awake now. Derek had never hyphenated the girls' last names after the divorce, despite the custody agreement stating they could choose when they were older. What kind of incidents? Are they hurt? Not physically, no, but Emma broke down crying during reading time yesterday when another student asked her about a story they'd seen online. Something about their mother abandoning them. She became so upset that she threw up and had to go to the nurse. Sophie has been withdrawn all week and refused to participate in show and tell when it was her turn to talk about family. The room felt like it was tilting. Millie pressed her palm against her forehead, trying to process that Derek's lies had now reached her 7-year-old daughters at school. Mrs. Reeves, there's been a serious misunderstanding. Their father posted something on social media that isn't accurate, and apparently it's spread to other parents. I see. Well, the girls are asking questions we don't know how to answer. Emma specifically asked me if it was true that you didn't want to be their mommy anymore. Sophie asked if you were coming to the Halloween parade next week, or if you were too busy with your paintings, like Daddy said. Each word felt like a physical blow. Millie had been planning to drive down to Phoenix for the Halloween parade. She'd already taken the day off and bought matching costumes to surprise the girls. Derek knew this. She'd coordinated it with him 2 weeks ago. Mrs. Reeves, I'll be at that parade. I've never missed a Halloween parade, and I'm not starting now. But I think I need to speak with their father about what information he's sharing with Emma and Sophie. That might be wise. In the meantime, is there anything you'd like me to tell the girls? They're clearly confused and hurting. Millie closed her eyes, fighting back tears. Please tell them that I love them more than anything in the world, and that grown-ups sometimes say things when they're angry that aren't true. Tell them I'll see them very soon. After hanging up, Millie stared at her phone for a long moment. Derek had escalated this beyond social media drama. He was now actively damaging their daughter's emotional well-being to maintain his false narrative. The protective mother in her was furious, but the part of her that had spent 3 years trying to heal from their toxic marriage was terrified of engaging with him directly. She tried calling Derek's number, straight to voicemail. She tried texting, no response. By 10 a.m., she realized he was deliberately ignoring her, probably hoping she'd give up and let the story die down naturally while he played the victim. That's when Millie made the decision that would change everything. She opened her laptop and began typing an email to Sarah Chen, the journalist from Portland Morning Show who had requested an interview. But instead of accepting the interview, she had a different proposition. Miss Chen, I appreciate your interest in my story, but I think there's a better way to handle this situation. I have documented evidence that contradicts the viral social media post about me abandoning my children. Rather than doing a standard interview, I'd like to propose something more comprehensive, a fact-based investigation into what really happened during my divorce and custody battle. I have court documents, medical records, and official correspondence that tell a very different story than what's currently circulating online. If you're interested in the truth rather than just the trending topic, please call me.
She hit send before she could second-guess herself. Within an hour, her phone rang. Sarah Chen's voice was sharp, interested. Ms. Monroe, I've been covering family court stories for 8 years, and I can usually spot the holes in these viral social media narratives. Your ex-husband's story has some inconsistencies that caught my attention. What kind of documentation are you talking about? The kind that shows I didn't abandon my children. I was hospitalized. The kind that shows the custody arrangement wasn't because I chose career over family. It was court-mandated during my recovery. The kind that proves everything Derek Patterson has said publicly is a deliberate lie designed to cover up what he did to our family. There was a pause. Ms. Monroe, those are serious allegations. If you're willing to go on record with evidence, I'm willing to investigate. But you need to understand that once we start this process, there's no going back. Your ex-husband will likely respond, and this could get very public very quickly. Millie looked at the manila envelope still spread across her kitchen table, then at the framed photo of Emma and Sophie on her desk, taken during their last weekend together, both girls grinning with chocolate chip pancake crumbs on their cheeks. Ms. Chen, my daughters are being emotionally traumatized at school because their classmates' parents think I'm a deadbeat mother. My 7-year-olds are asking guidance counselors if mommy still loves them. Derek opened this door when he decided to lie publicly about our family. I'm just going to walk through it with the truth. All right. Can you meet me tomorrow afternoon? Bring everything you have. And Ms. Monroe, if this evidence is as solid as you claim, we're not just going to clear your name. We're going to expose exactly what kind of man would destroy his children's relationship with their mother for social media sympathy. After the call, Millie felt something she hadn't experienced in 3 years.
anticipation instead of dread. For so long, she'd been reactive, responding to Derek's moves, accommodating his demands, accepting his version of events for the sake of peace. But he'd made a critical error by bringing his daughters into his public deception. She spent the rest of the day organizing her evidence chronologically. Hospital admission records from December 15th, 2019. The restraining order filed 3 days later. Bank statements showing Derek had emptied their joint accounts while she was unconscious. Text messages he'd sent to her family claiming she'd run off to pursue art while she was actually in intensive care. The most damaging evidence was a recorded phone conversation from 2 months after she'd moved to Portland. Derek had called demanding that she sign away additional custody time in exchange for him not pursuing her for alimony. He didn't know she was recording, and his casual admission that he'd spun the story to make himself look like the victim was captured in crystal clear audio. "Look, Millie, everyone already thinks you bailed on the girls anyway. Why not make it official? Sign over the extra weekends, and I won't drag you through court for spousal support. We both know you can't afford another legal battle." She'd never used that recording, hoping they could co-parent peacefully for Emma and Sophie's sake. But peaceful co-parenting required good faith from both parties, and Derek had just proven he was incapable of that. As evening approached, Millie received a text from Hannah. "Derek blocked me on social media after I commented that people should hear both sides. What's your plan?" For the first time in 3 years, Millie had a real answer to that question. "I'm going to tell the truth," she typed back. "All of it." That night, she slept better than she had since Derek's post went viral. Tomorrow, she would sit across from a journalist and reveal everything she'd kept hidden to protect her daughter's image of their father. It would be painful, and the fallout would be intense, but the alternative, letting Emma and Sophie grow up believing their mother had abandoned them, was unacceptable. Derek had gambled that she would never fight back, that her desire to protect the girls would keep her silent forever. He was about to learn that there's a difference between protecting your children and letting them be poisoned against you. The catalyst moment had arrived, and Millie Monroe was finally ready to stop running from her past.
Sarah Chen arrived at the downtown Portland coffee shop 15 minutes early, her laptop bag slung over her shoulder and a digital recorder visible in her jacket pocket. Millie spotted her immediately. The journalist had the focused, slightly predatory look of someone who'd spent years extracting truth from reluctant sources. "You look nervous," Sarah said as they settled into a corner booth away from the morning rush crowd. "I should be. I'm about to destroy the father of my children on public television." Millie placed the manila envelope on the table between them, her hands trembling slightly. 3 years ago, I made a promise to myself that I'd never use this evidence unless I absolutely had to. Sarah pulled out her recorder and notebook. "What changed?" "My daughters asked their school counselor if mommy still loves them because daddy said I chose painting over being their mother." Millie's voice hardened. Derek crossed a line when he made this about Emma and Sophie instead of just about me. "Before we dive into the documents, I need you to walk me through what really happened in December 2019. In your own words, no documentation yet. Just tell me the story Derek doesn't want people to know." Millie took a deep breath. She'd practiced this moment in her head 1,000 times, but speaking it aloud felt like tearing off a bandage that had been protecting an infected wound. "Derek and I had been having problems for about a year. He'd become controlling about money, about my friends, about how I spent my time. When the twins started preschool, I wanted to go back to work part-time doing graphic design, but he said it would make him look like he couldn't provide for his family. So I started doing freelance projects secretly, saving money in an account he didn't know about." Sarah's pen moved quickly across her notepad. "How did he find out?" "A client paid me with a check that got delivered to our house instead of my P.O. box. Derek opened it, he always opened everything, and lost his mind. He accused me of planning to leave him, of being a terrible mother who cared more about work than her children. The argument went on for hours." "What happened that night?" "Derek had been drinking. He grabbed the checkbook from my hands, and when I tried to get it back, he shoved me. I fell and hit my head on the corner of our granite countertop. I don't remember anything after that until I woke up in the hospital with a severe concussion and 12 stitches." "And Derek's version of events?"
He told the hospital, the police, and everyone who would listen that I'd fallen during an argument because I was hysterical about being caught hiding money. He made it sound like an accident, like I was so emotionally unstable that I hurt myself. The police report reflects his statement because I was unconscious and couldn't give my version. Sarah looked up from her notes. But you had evidence this wasn't an accident? Millie opened the envelope and pulled out a printed email thread. Derek sent these to his brother while I was in intensive care. He thought I might not wake up. The doctors weren't sure about brain damage at first. Read this one, dated December 16th, the day after it happened. Sarah read aloud. Finally got rid of the Millie problem. She was getting too independent anyway, questioning everything I did. The girls are better off without her constant drama. Planning to file for emergency custody tomorrow while she's still in the hospital. No judge will give kids to a woman who's mentally unstable enough to hurt herself. He was planning to use my head injury against me in court before I even regained consciousness, Millie said quietly. But what he didn't know is that his brother forwarded that email to his wife, who forwarded it to my sister, Hannah. She screenshot everything and gave it to the lawyer my parents hired. This is premeditated, Sarah said, her journalist instincts clearly engaged. He created a narrative while you were physically unable to defend yourself. It gets worse. Millie pulled out a bank statement. While I was in the hospital, Derek emptied our joint accounts, $23,000, and put it into an account with just his name. Then he withdrew another $8,000 from a credit card and paid 6 months of rent in advance on an apartment across town.
Sarah studied the dates on the transactions. All of this happened within 48 hours of your injury? He'd been planning to leave me anyway. The head injury just gave him the perfect excuse to make me look like the unstable one who abandoned the family. When I got out of the hospital 5 days later, I came home to find the locks changed and a note saying the girls were staying somewhere safe until I got professional help. Where were Emma and Sophie during all this? With his mother in Scottsdale. Derek told them I was sick and needed to go away to get better. They were 4 years old. They didn't understand why Mommy disappeared. By the time I was mentally clear enough to fight for them, Derek had already filed for emergency custody and painted me as an unfit mother who'd abandoned her children. Sarah was writing furiously now. How did you end up with any custody at all? My lawyer was brilliant. She subpoenaed Derek's phone records and found all the emails and texts he'd sent while I was unconscious, planning how to spin the situation. She also got the hospital security footage showing Derek leaving the emergency room at 11 p.m., then coming back at 3 a.m. with a suitcase and a story about me threatening to hurt myself if he didn't bring my things. Millie pulled out a medical report. This is the emergency room doctor's assessment. She noted that my injuries were consistent with a fall, but the location and severity suggest significant force was involved. She also documented defensive wounds on my arms that Derek couldn't explain. Why didn't you press criminal charges? I tried, but Derek had already established his narrative with the police, and I was dealing with post-concussion syndrome that affected my memory and emotional regulation for months. My lawyer advised me to focus on getting custody of my daughters rather than fighting a criminal case that would be hard to prove. Sarah leaned back in her chair. So the supervised visitations that Derek mentions in his social media post were court-mandated while I recovered from the brain injury he caused. The judge wanted to make sure I was mentally stable before allowing unsupervised time with Emma and Sophie. Derek made it sound like punishment for abandonment, but it was actually protection during my medical recovery. And moving to Portland was recommended by my neurologist and therapist. They thought a fresh start away from Derek would help my recovery. The court approved it as long as I maintained regular visits with the girls and continued therapy. Derek fought it, of course, but the evidence of his financial manipulation and emotional abuse was too strong. Sarah looked at the pile of documents spreading across their table. This is a completely different story than what's circulating online. Derek is very good at controlling narratives. He always has been. For 3 years, I let him have his version because I thought it was better for Emma and Sophie to have a stable home with their father than to know the truth about how our marriage ended. But now he's using his lies to poison them against me, and I can't allow that. What's your goal here, Millie? What do you want to happen when this story comes out? Millie was quiet for a moment. staring out the window at the Portland street where she'd built her new life. I want my daughters to know that their mother never abandoned them. I want the people who've been sending me death threats based on Derek's lies to know the truth. And I want Derek to face consequences for what he did to our family. You understand that going public with this will destroy Derek's reputation, potentially affect his job, his relationship with his girlfriend, his standing in the community. He made that choice when he decided to destroy mine for social media sympathy. I tried to protect him for Emma and Sophie's sake. He repaid that protection by telling 50,000 strangers that I'm a deadbeat mother who chose art over my children. I'm done protecting someone who's actively trying to hurt me. Sarah closed her notebook and turned off the recorder. I need to verify some of these documents and get statements from other sources. How soon do you want this story to air? As soon as possible. Every day this lie spread, more people believe Derek's version. And every day Emma and Sophie go to school thinking their classmates' parents hate their mother for something that never happened. All right. Give me 48 hours to build the story properly. But Millie, once this airs, there's no going back. Derek will retaliate. Probably legally. Are you prepared for that fight? Millie gathered the documents back into the envelope, her movements decisive and controlled. Derek taught me that sometimes you have to fight dirty to survive. He just never expected me to learn the lesson so well.
The first sign that Derek knew something was coming arrived in Millie's inbox at 2:17 a.m., 36 hours after her meeting with Sarah Chen. The subject line read, "Final warning, legal action pending." Millie opened the email with shaking hands, her heart pounding as she read Derek's carefully crafted threat, disguised as concern for their daughters. "Millie, I've been informed that you're planning to make false statements about me to the media. I want you to know that I've retained attorney Marcus Webb of Webb, Sterling & Associates to protect my reputation and our daughter's privacy. Any defamatory statements you make will result in immediate legal action for slander, libel, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. Think about Emma and Sophie before you destroy their father's reputation with lies. They're happy and stable now. Don't ruin that because you're angry about losing custody. Derek." The email's timestamp told Millie everything she needed to know about Derek's state of mind. He was awake at 2 a.m., panicked enough to send legal threats, which meant someone had tipped him off about Sarah's investigation. But who? Her phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. "Can you call me? We have a problem." 20 minutes later, they were on a secure video call. Sarah's expression was grim as she explained what had happened during her fact-checking process. "I contacted Phoenix General Hospital to verify your medical records. Standard procedure for any story involving documentation. But when I spoke to the records department, they told me someone else had already requested your file information earlier today, someone claiming to be from a law firm." Millie felt her stomach drop. "Derek's gotten to the hospital records?" "Not exactly. They can't release your medical information to a third party without your consent, but they can confirm whether someone was treated there on specific dates. Derek's lawyer now knows we're investigating, and he's already started building a defense." "What kind of defense?" Sarah pulled up her laptop screen. "I did some research on Marcus Webb. He specializes in reputation management for high-profile clients, particularly in cases involving social media and public perception. He's not just a divorce attorney. He's someone you hire when you need to control a narrative in the press." "That doesn't sound like something Derek can afford on a pharmaceutical sales salary," Millie said, her mind racing. "That's what I thought too, so I did some digging into Derek's finances since your divorce. Millie, your ex-husband isn't just doing well, he's doing very well. His girlfriend Clara owns 3 successful yoga studios in Phoenix, and they bought a $450,000 house in Scottsdale 6 months ago. The information hit Millie like a physical blow. While she'd been living in a studio apartment and driving a 12-year-old Honda, Derek had been building a comfortable new life with Clara's money. The financial struggles he'd claimed during their custody battle had apparently disappeared as soon as he found a wealthy girlfriend. "There's more," Sarah continued. "I found Derek's LinkedIn profile. He has been promoted twice since your divorce and now manages the entire Southwest region for his company.
His income has more than doubled, but according to the court records you showed me, he's never requested a modification to increase child support payments. He's been hiding his income, Millie realized. If the court knew he was making twice as much money, they might reconsider custody arrangements and definitely increase support for Emma and Sophie. Exactly, which means Derek has a lot more to lose from your story than just his reputation. If this comes out, you could potentially file for custody modification and increased support. That's probably why he hired a reputation management specialist instead of a regular attorney. Sarah screen shifted to show a new document. But here's where things get complicated. Webb sent a cease and desist letter to my news director this afternoon. He's claiming that airing your story would constitute tortious interference with Derek's parental rights and could traumatize Emma and Sophie by publicly exposing private family matters. Can he stop the story from airing? Not legally, no, but he can make it expensive and time-consuming for the station to defend. My news director is getting nervous about potential lawsuits, especially since Webb is threatening to sue for damages if Derek loses his job or custody due to false allegations. Millie felt the familiar sensation of Derek pulling strings to control her life, even from hundreds of miles away. So, what do? We get better evidence. Webb's letter actually revealed something important. He's not denying that Derek caused your injury or manipulated the financial situation. He's arguing that it's a private family matter that shouldn't be made public. That tells me he knows Derek is guilty but thinks he can win on procedural grounds. What kind of evidence do we need? Sarah pulled up her notepad. I need to interview Dr. Elizabeth Marsh, the emergency room physician who treated you. I need to get the hospital security footage if it still exists. I need statements from family members who witnessed Derek's behavior, and I need the original police report, not just the summary that was influenced by Derek's initial statement. Dr. Marsh might not want to talk to a journalist about a patient from 3 years ago. She will if you give written permission and we explain that this is about protecting children from emotional abuse. Most medical professionals take that seriously.
Over the next week, Millie learned that fighting back against Derek's narrative required skills she'd never needed before. She had to become an investigator, a legal strategist, and a public relations expert all at once. The first challenge was tracking down Dr. Marsh, who had left Phoenix General and was now working at a trauma center in Denver. It took 5 phone calls and a detailed letter explaining the situation before Dr. Marsh agreed to a recorded interview with Sarah. I remember your case very clearly, Dr. Marsh told them during the video call. The injury pattern was concerning. Your husband's explanation didn't match the physical evidence, and his behavior in the emergency room was unusual. How so? Sarah asked. Most spouses of head injury patients are frantic, asking constant questions about prognosis and recovery. Derek Patterson seemed more interested in establishing the story about how the accident happened. He repeated the same details multiple times to different staff members, which is often a red flag for domestic violence cases. The doctor's statement was powerful, but Derek's legal team had been busy too. Marcus Webb had tracked down Millie's former neighbors in Phoenix and interviewed them about her mental state during the marriage. He'd also subpoenaed her therapy records from after the divorce, looking for evidence of instability he could use to discredit her story. They're building a counter-narrative, Sarah explained during one of their strategy sessions. Webb is going to argue that you were mentally unstable during the marriage, that the head injury was self-inflicted due to psychological issues, and that you're now making false allegations because you're angry about losing custody. But the medical evidence contradicts that. Medical evidence requires expert interpretation. Webb will find his own medical expert who'll testify that your injuries could have been caused by an accidental fall during an emotional outburst. Millie was learning that the truth wasn't enough. She needed the truth presented more convincingly than Derek's lies. That required resources she didn't have and skills she was still developing. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. While researching Derek's employment history, Sarah discovered that he'd been investigated by his company's HR department 6 months before Millie's injury. A female colleague had filed a complaint alleging that Derek had made threatening comments about his wife getting out of line and needing to learn her place. The complaint was dropped when the colleague left the company, but Sarah tracked her down. Her name is Jennifer Walsh, and she's willing to testify about Derek's statements regarding controlling his wife. "What did he say exactly?" Sarah asked. According to Jennifer, Derek bragged about keeping you financially dependent and said he'd handle a situation if you ever tried to leave him. She filed the complaint because she was worried about your safety. The pattern was becoming clear, but so was Derek's strategy to discredit it. Every piece of evidence Millie and Sarah uncovered was met with a countermove from Webb's team. When they found witnesses to Derek's controlling behavior, Webb found character witnesses who praised Derek as a devoted father. When they presented medical evidence, Webb hired experts to dispute the interpretation. "This is going to be harder than I thought," Millie admitted during a late-night phone call with Sarah. "Derek has more money, better lawyers, and he's had 3 years to build his reputation as the victim. But he's also gotten overconfident. Webb's aggressive tactics are actually helping us. He's trying so hard to suppress the story, but it's clear they're afraid of what we'll expose. That desperation will show when we go public." By the end of the week, Millie had learned that telling the truth wasn't just about having evidence. It was about presenting that evidence more effectively than your opponent presents their lies. It was a game she'd never wanted to play, but Derek had forced her into it by turning their private tragedy into public entertainment. The learning curve was steep, but Millie was discovering resources and allies she hadn't known existed. The question now was whether she could master these new skills quickly enough to counter Derek's 3-year head start on controlling the narrative.
The call that shattered everything came on a Friday afternoon while Millie was reviewing the final interview footage with Sarah. Her phone displayed Derek's number, the first time he'd called her directly in over a year. "Millie, we need to talk. Now." His voice carried a controlled fury that made her blood run cold. "If this is about the investigation, you can speak to... This is about Emma. She's in the hospital." The world stopped. Millie's laptop slipped from her knees as she stood up, her heart hammering against her ribs. "What happened? Is she okay?" She tried to hurt herself last night. Clara found her in the bathroom with a pair of scissors, crying about how she wanted to go be with Mommy in heaven because kids at school said you were dead. The words hit Millie like physical blows. She gripped the back of a chair to keep from falling. "What are you talking about? I'm not dead. Why would she think..." "Because your little media circus has gotten so out of control that some internet trolls started spreading rumors that you killed yourself rather than face the truth about abandoning your kids. Emma saw it on Clara's tablet when she was watching YouTube Kids, a fucking comment thread on a video about our family." Millie felt like she was drowning. How badly is she hurt?" "Superficial cuts on her arms. But Millie, she's 7 years old, and she tried to hurt herself because she thought her mother was dead? The psychiatrist says she's been internalizing the conflict between what she remembers about you and what she's been hearing online. I'm coming to Phoenix. Right now." "No, you're not." Derek's voice turned ice cold. "I filed for an emergency custody modification. My lawyer is arguing that your media campaign has created a dangerous situation for both girls, and that all visitation should be suspended until this mess is resolved. You can't keep me from seeing them when Emma is hurt because of your lies." "My lies? Millie, there are conspiracy theorists on Reddit claiming I murdered you and faked your social media presence for the past 3 years. There are people posting our home address online and calling Clara's yoga studios with death threats. Emma and Sophie can't go to school because reporters are trying to interview their classmates." The full scope of what her decision had unleashed was becoming clear, and Millie felt sick with the realization that she'd underestimated how quickly social media could turn an attempt at truth-telling into a dangerous circus. "Derek, I never wanted any of this to hurt Emma and Sophie. I just wanted people to know I didn't abandon them." "Well, congratulations. Now everyone knows, and our daughters are the ones paying the price. Sophie won't speak to anyone. She just sits in her room drawing pictures of our family with you crossed out in black crayon. The school psychologist says both girls are showing signs of severe anxiety and trauma." Millie sank into her chair, the weight of unintended consequences crushing down on her.
Let me talk to them, please. Let me explain that I'm okay and that I... Absolutely not. You've done enough damage. My lawyer is seeking a restraining order to keep you away from the girls until this media attention dies down. And Millie, if either of my daughters gets hurt because of the chaos you've created, I will destroy you in ways you can't even imagine. The line went dead. Millie stared at her phone, her hands shaking uncontrollably. Sarah, who had overheard the entire conversation, looked pale and shaken. This isn't your fault, Sarah said quietly. You couldn't have predicted that people would take the story and run with it in such extreme directions. But Millie barely heard her. All she could think about was Emma in a hospital room, believing her mother was dead, hurting herself because strangers on the internet had turned their family tragedy into entertainment. The very thing she'd been trying to prevent. Her daughters being hurt by lies about their mother had happened anyway, just in a different form. I need to see the girls, Millie said, already reaching for her keys. I need to show Emma that I'm alive and that I love her.
Millie, Derek wasn't bluffing about the restraining order. If you show up in Phoenix now, he'll have you arrested, and that will only make everything worse. Then what am I supposed to do? Let my 7-year-old daughter think her mother is dead while she's in a psychiatric ward? Sarah was quiet for a long moment, then pulled up her laptop. Show me what Derek is talking about. Let's see how bad this has gotten. They spent the next hour diving into the online chaos that had erupted around their story. What had started as Millie's attempt to correct Derek's lies had mutated into a sprawling internet conspiracy theory with dozens of different versions. Some people believed Derek's original story and saw Millie's evidence as fabricated. Others believed Millie but had taken the story to extreme conclusions, claiming Derek was part of a larger pattern of men who abuse their wives and steal their children. A third group had become convinced the entire story was fake, created for social media attention. The most disturbing thread suggested that Millie had actually died by suicide and that someone else was posting on her social media accounts to cover it up. The evidence for this theory included the fact that her recent posts were too coherent for someone with brain damage and that she hadn't made any public appearances since the story broke. This is insane, Millie said, scrolling through hundreds of comments, analyzing her word choices and photo timestamps for signs that she was dead. How did people get here from me just trying to show court documents? This is what happens when personal stories become viral content, Sarah explained grimly. People don't just consume the information. They feel entitled to investigate, theorize, and create their own versions. Your story became a puzzle for people to solve, and when the pieces didn't fit their theories, they made up new pieces. The breaking point came when Millie found a YouTube video with 200,000 views titled Proof That Millie Monroe is Dead, Timeline Analysis. The creator had spent 30 minutes analyzing Millie's social media posts, claiming inconsistencies in her writing style proved she'd been murdered by Derek and replaced by someone pretending to be her. They're saying I'm dead, Millie said, her voice hollow. My daughter tried to hurt herself because strangers convinced her that her mother is dead, and now there are hundreds of thousands of people who believe it. We can fix this, Sarah said urgently. We do a live interview, prove you're alive, set the record straight about what actually happened versus what people are speculating. And give them more content to analyze and theorize about? Millie shook her head. Sarah, I wanted to clear my name and help my daughters understand the truth. Instead, I've created a situation where Emma is in the hospital and both girls are more traumatized than they were when people just thought I was a deadbeat mom. The cruel irony wasn't lost on her. Derek's original lie that she'd abandoned Emma and Sophie was hurtful but manageable. Her attempt to counter that lie with the truth had created something far worse, a media circus that was actively endangering her daughter's mental health. Maybe Derek was right, Millie said quietly. Maybe some lies are better left alone if the truth causes more damage. You don't mean that. Don't I? Emma is in a psychiatric hospital because I decided my reputation was more important than keeping our family problems private. Sophie is drawing pictures with me crossed out in black crayon. How is that better than people thinking I chose art over motherhood? Sarah closed her laptop and looked at Millie directly. Because lies compound over time. Derek's story was already affecting your daughters at school. It was going to get worse as they got older and started reading those comments themselves. You didn't create this problem. You exposed it. But you're right that we need to fix it, not just fight it. How do we fix internet conspiracy theories and 7-year-olds who think their mother is dead? We prove you're alive in a way that can't be disputed, and we find a way to reach Emma and Sophie directly, even if Derek won't let you see them in person. As they talked through options, Millie realized that her fight with Derek had evolved into something much larger and more dangerous. This was no longer about court documents and custody arrangements. It was about protecting her daughters from the toxic chaos that modern social media could create around any personal story. The breaking point had arrived, and the path forward was unclear. But one thing was certain. Emma and Sophie's well-being had to come first, even if it meant admitting that telling the truth had been a catastrophic mistake. The breakthrough came from the most unexpected source possible, Clara herself. Millie was sitting in her car outside Portland's Children's Hospital at 3 a.m., unable to sleep, when her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown Phoenix number. The text was brief. "This is Clara. We need to talk. Alone. Emma asked for you while she was sedated, and Derek doesn't know I have your number." 3 hours later, they were on a video call. Clara looking exhausted and conflicted in what appeared to be her car parked outside a Starbucks. "I need you to know that I never wanted any of this to happen," Clara began, her yoga instructor composure cracking. "When Derek told me his story about you abandoning the girls, I believed him completely. I thought I was helping rebuild a family that had been broken by a selfish mother. Why are you calling me now?" Clara looked around nervously as if Derek might appear at any moment. "Because Emma kept asking for you while she was unconscious from the sedation. She was having nightmares about finding you, and when she woke up, the first thing she said was, 'I know Mommy isn't really dead because she would have said goodbye.'" Millie felt her throat tighten. "What did you tell her?" "I told her you were alive, but Derek got furious. He said I was undermining his efforts to protect the girls from more trauma. But Millie, I've been living with Derek for 2 years, and I've started noticing things that don't match the story he told me about our marriage." "What kind of things?" Clara pulled out a notebook, her hands shaking slightly. "Derek told me you were financially irresponsible, and that's why you had money problems during the divorce. But I handle our finances now, and Derek is obsessive about controlling every dollar. He monitors my business accounts, questions every expense, and gets angry when I spend money without asking him first." This wasn't what Millie had expected from Clara, an admission that Derek's controlling behavior hadn't ended with their marriage. "He told me you were mentally unstable, and that's why you needed supervised visitation with Emma and Sophie. But last month, I had a panic attack during a particularly stressful week with the girls, and Derek's response was to threaten to take them away from me too if I couldn't handle the responsibility of being a stepmother." "Clara, where is this going?" "I started paying attention to how Derek talks about women in general, about my employees when they ask for time off, about Emma's teachers when they suggest she might benefit from counseling, about you, even when the girls aren't around. There's a pattern of him describing women as either perfect angels who do everything he wants or crazy, selfish monsters who need to be controlled." Clara paused to wipe her eyes. "Then, yesterday, while Derek was at the hospital with Emma, I went through his office looking for insurance information. I found a box of documents from your divorce that he's never shown me." Millie's pulse quickened. "What kind of documents?" "Medical bills from your hospital stay, copies of text messages he sent while you were unconscious, bank statements showing the money transfers. And Millie, there were photos." "Photos of what?" "Of you in the hospital, unconscious, with the head injury. Derek took pictures of you while you were in intensive care, and he wrote notes on the back about how to use them if you ever tried to cause problems in the future." The revelation hit Millie like ice water. Derek had documented her most vulnerable moment, not out of concern, but as ammunition for future battles. The calculated cruelty of it was breathtaking. "There's more," Clara continued. I found a journal Derek kept during your separation. He wrote detailed plans about how to present you as an unfit mother, including specific lies he was going to tell about your behavior and mental state. He practiced different versions of the abandonment story until he found one that made him look the most sympathetic. Do you still have access to these documents? I photographed everything before putting it back. But Millie, I'm scarred. If Derek finds out I've seen this stuff, I don't know what he'll do. The man I thought I was in love with doesn't exist. He's been playing a character for 2 years, and I'm just now seeing who he really is. Clara's voice broke completely. I've been helping him turn Emma and Sophie against you for 2 years. I taught them to call me their real mommy because you chose not to be a good mommy. I encouraged them to stop asking about you during visits. I thought I was helping them move on from abandonment, but I was actually helping Derek erase you from their lives.
The weight of Clara's confession was staggering. Derek hadn't just lied to the public. He'd systematically manipulated his own girlfriend into becoming a weapon against Millie's relationship with her daughters. Why are you telling me this now? Because Emma almost died, and it's my fault too. When she saw those online comments about you being dead, she came to me crying, asking if it was true. I panicked and told her I didn't know because Derek handles all the mommy stuff. She asked me why we never talked about you if you were still alive, and I couldn't answer her. Clara pulled up one of the photos on her phone. This is what Emma drew the day before she hurt herself. She showed it to me and asked if this is what happened to her family. The drawing showed a stick figure woman lying on the ground with red crayon around her head, while a stick figure man stood over her with 2 little girls. Above the scene, Emma had written in uneven letters, "Did Daddy make Mommy go away forever?" Millie stared at the image, realizing that her 7-year-old daughter had intuited more about the truth than any adult had been willing to acknowledge. Emma knows something happened to you that Derek doesn't want to talk about, Clara said. And Sophie has been having nightmares about bad men who hurt mommies for months. Derek keeps saying they'll forget about you if we just don't mention you, but they're not forgetting. They're getting more anxious and confused. What do you want to do about this? Clara was quiet for a long moment. I want to help you get your daughters back. Not just visitation, full custody. Derek is psychologically damaging them, and I've been helping him do it without realizing it. That would destroy your relationship with him. My relationship with him was built on lies. I fell in love with a character he created to manipulate me into raising his children while he erased their mother. That's not love, that's recruitment. Clara pulled out a stack of papers. I made copies of everything in Derek's files. The photos of you in the hospital, his journal entries about manufacturing evidence against you, bank statements showing he hid assets during the divorce, and medical records proving you were too injured to have abandoned anyone. Why would you risk this? Derek will come after you legally and financially. Because I'm a mother too, Millie. I have a daughter from my first marriage, and if someone did to her what Derek did to Emma and Sophie, systematically turned her against her mother with lies and manipulation, I'd want someone to help her. The realization that Clara had her own daughter added another layer to her decision. She wasn't just risking her relationship with Derek, she was potentially risking her own custody situation if Derek decided to retaliate. There's something else, Clara said. Derek has been recording Emma and Sophie during their therapy sessions without the therapist's knowledge. He uses the recordings to coach them on what to say about you and to identify any problematic feelings they might be developing about wanting to see you more. That's illegal! I know, and I have the recordings. Derek keeps them on his laptop in a folder labeled Evidence. He thinks they prove the girls are better off without you, but they actually show him manipulating traumatized children into denying their love for their mother. Millie felt something shift inside her. Not just anger at Derek, but a crystalline clarity about what needed to happen next. Clara's evidence didn't just prove Derek had lied about the past, it proved he was actively damaging Emma and Sophie in the present. Clara, if we do this, there's no going back. Derek will try to destroy both of us.
He's already destroying your daughters. Emma tried to hurt herself because she's so confused about whether you're alive, dead, good, bad, or something in between. Sophie draws pictures of families where the mommy is crossed out in black. That's not healing. That's systematic psychological abuse. What do you propose we do? We give all this evidence to your journalist friend and to a family court judge simultaneously. We prove that Derek hasn't just been lying to the public, he's been lying to his own children about their mother's love for them. And we do it before he can destroy the evidence or manipulate the girls any further. For the first time since Emma's hospitalization, Millie felt hope instead of despair. Claire's evidence was the missing piece that could finally expose Derek's true nature, not just as someone who had covered up domestic violence, but as someone who was actively perpetrating psychological abuse against his own children. The breakthrough discovery wasn't just about the past anymore. It was about saving Emma and Sophie's future.
The coordinated attack began at exactly 9 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, 3 days after Clara's revelation. Millie had spent those 72 hours in a whirlwind of preparation that felt like planning a military operation rather than a custody battle. Sarah Chen walked into the Maricopa County Family Court building carrying 2 briefcases full of evidence, while simultaneously, her news director was filing a motion for expedited court access to Derek's illegal therapy recordings. At the same moment, Millie's newly hired Phoenix attorney, Rebecca Santos, was presenting an emergency custody modification request based on evidence of ongoing psychological abuse. The strategy was surgical. Hit Derek from multiple angles simultaneously so he couldn't manipulate or destroy evidence before the truth came out. This has to be perfect, Rebecca had warned Millie during their marathon preparation session the night before. Derek's attorney, Marcus Webb, is going to claim this is a coordinated media attack designed to circumvent proper legal channels. We need to prove that every piece of evidence is legitimate and that Emma and Sophie are in immediate psychological danger. The first breakthrough came from an unexpected legal precedent. Rebecca had discovered that Arizona courts could order immediate temporary custody changes when children were documented to be victims of parental alienation syndrome, exactly what Derek had been doing to Emma and Sophie for 3 years. Judge Patricia Hernandez listened to 45 minutes of Derek's recorded therapy sessions, her expression growing more disturbed with each clip. In one recording, Derek could be heard coaching Emma. "Remember, Mommy chose to leave us because she thought her art was more important than being your mommy. That made you very sad, didn't it?" Emma's small voice responded, "But I don't remember being sad about that, Daddy." "That's because you were very little, sweetheart. Trust Daddy to remember for you." In another recording, Derek interrupted Sophie's session when she mentioned missing her mother. "Sophie, we don't talk about sad feelings that aren't real. You're happy with Daddy and Clara, right? Say you're happy." The psychological manipulation evident in these recordings is systematic and deliberate, testified Dr. Jennifer Martinez, the court-appointed child psychologist who had reviewed all of Clara's evidence. Mr. Patterson is actively rewriting his children's memories and emotional responses to serve his own narrative. This constitutes severe psychological abuse. Derek's reaction to the coordinated revelations was swift and vicious. Within hours of the court filing, he launched a counteroffensive that revealed just how deep his deception had gone. Marcus Webb released a statement claiming that Clara was a disgruntled ex-girlfriend who had stolen private documents during a psychotic break triggered by Derek ending their relationship. He produced text messages allegedly showing Clara's mental instability and suggested she had collaborated with Millie to fabricate evidence. But Clara had anticipated this move. During her 3 days of preparation, she had documented everything, photographing Derek's files in their original locations, recording herself discovering the evidence, and getting timestamps on all her communications with Millie. "Derek taught me to be thorough with documentation when I was helping him build his case against you," Clara told the court via video testimony from a secure location. "I used his own methods against him." The most devastating moment came when Derek took the witness stand to defend himself. Under cross-examination from Rebecca, his carefully constructed persona began to crumble. "Mr. Patterson, you testified that your ex-wife abandoned your children in December 2019. Are you aware that she was hospitalized for 5 days during that period?" "She was hospitalized after hurting herself during an emotional breakdown about being caught hiding money from me."
Rebecca pulled out the emergency room photos Derek had taken. Mr. Patterson, do these look like self-inflicted injuries to you? Derek's composure slipped for the first time. I took those photos as documentation in case there were legal questions later. You took photographs of your unconscious, brain-injured wife for legal purposes? I was protecting myself in case she later claimed I had hurt her. But you've just testified that she hurt herself. Why would you need protection from false claims if you believed she was self-destructive?
The courtroom was silent as Derek realized he'd contradicted his own narrative. His attorney called for a recess, but the damage was done. The final push came from Emma herself, though not in a way anyone had anticipated. On the second day of hearings, she was brought to the courthouse for an in-chambers interview with Judge Hernandez. The 7-year-old had specifically requested to speak to the judge lady after Clara had gently explained that court was where grown-ups went to solve problems about families. Millie wasn't allowed in the room, but Rebecca emerged from the chambers with tears in her eyes. "What did Emma say?" Millie asked urgently. "She asked the judge if you were her real mommy or her pretend mommy, because Daddy told her you were pretend, but Clara said you were real. Then she asked if she was allowed to love you without making Daddy angry." The innocence of the question, whether a child was allowed to love her own mother, struck everyone in the courtroom with its tragic implications. Sophie's interview was even more heartbreaking. The usually quiet 7-year-old had brought one of her drawings, a detailed crayon picture of 2 little girls standing between 2 women with arrows pointing from the girls toward both women labeled love. Sophie told Judge Hernandez that she draws pictures of loving both mommies because she doesn't understand why she has to choose, Rebecca reported. She said Daddy gets mad when she draws pictures with you in them, so she hides them under her bed. Judge Hernandez's decision came down 12 hours after Sophie's interview. The ruling was comprehensive and damning. This court finds clear and convincing evidence that Derek Patterson has engaged in systematic parental alienation designed to damage his children's relationship with their biological mother. The evidence shows a pattern of psychological manipulation, deliberate isolation from maternal family, and coaching of children to suppress natural affection for their mother. Furthermore, the court finds that Mr. Patterson's public social media campaign was not an expression of legitimate grievance, but rather an extension of his pattern of controlling and manipulating the narrative around his ex-wife and children. Most concerning is the evidence that Mr. Patterson has been secretly recording court-mandated therapy sessions and using those recordings to further manipulate his children's emotional development. The custody order was immediate and sweeping. Emma and Sophie would be placed in Millie's primary custody within 48 hours, with Derek receiving supervised visitation pending completion of a parental alienation recovery program. Clara was granted temporary guardianship rights to ensure stability during the transition, and Derek was ordered to undergo psychological evaluation and anger management counseling. But Derek's final move was his most dangerous. That evening, as Millie was preparing to fly to Phoenix to collect her daughters, she received a call from Clara. "He's gone," Clara said, her voice tight with panic. "Derek picked up Emma and Sophie from school this afternoon and didn't bring them home. His car isn't here, his closet is empty, and he's not answering his phone." "Gone where?" Millie asked urgently. "I don't know, but there's a note on his desk that says, 'The girls deserve better than a system that rewards lying mothers and punishes devoted fathers. We'll be somewhere safe until sanity returns.'" The custody victory had turned into a kidnapping crisis in the matter of hours. Derek had taken Emma and Sophie and disappeared, leaving no trace of where they might be going. "How much of a head start does he have?" Millie asked, already booking the next flight to Phoenix. "Maybe 6 hours. The school said he seemed normal when he picked them up. He told them it was a surprise family adventure." An Amber Alert was issued within the hour, but Derek had proven over the past 3 years that he was capable of elaborate deceptions and long-term planning. He could be anywhere by now, and Emma and Sophie, already traumatized and confused, were now being taken away from everything familiar by a father whose grip on reality appeared to be completely broken. The final push had succeeded in exposing Derek's lies and winning custody, but it had also driven him to desperate measures that put Emma and Sophie in immediate physical danger. The victory had become a race against time to find 2 little girls before their father's delusions put them beyond reach forever.
The phone call that ended the nightmare came at 4:23 a.m.
18 hours after Derek had vanished with Emma and Sophie. Millie was pacing her hotel room in Phoenix, coordinating with FBI agents and watching every news update, when Detective Maria Rodriguez's voice cut through her panic. "We found them. They're safe. Derek is in custody." Millie collapsed into the nearest chair, 3 days of adrenaline finally releasing in a flood of tears and shaking. "Where were they? Are the girls hurt?" Derek drove to his mother's house in Flagstaff. His mother called us when she realized what was happening. Apparently, Derek showed up at midnight with the girls and a story about you being dangerous and the courts being corrupt. When his mother saw the Amber Alert on the news and realized Derek had lied to her too, she convinced him to turn himself in. The irony wasn't lost on Millie. Derek's own mother had become the person who saved Emma and Sophie from his delusions. 2 hours later, Millie was sitting in a family reunification center, her heart hammering, as a social worker prepared Emma and Sophie for their first unsupervised visit with their mother in 3 years. The girls appeared in the doorway looking exhausted and confused, clutching matching teddy bears that Derek's mother had apparently given them during the crisis. "Mommy?" Emma's voice was small, uncertain. "Are you real or are you pretend?" Millie knelt down to their level, fighting back tears. "I'm real, sweetheart. I'm your real mommy, and I've been real this whole time. I've missed you both so much." Sophie stepped forward first, tentatively reaching out to touch Millie's face, as if she couldn't believe she was solid. "Daddy said you were gone forever, but Clara said you were coming back. I didn't know who to believe." "You can believe Clara, and you can believe me. I never wanted to be away from you, and I'm never going to leave you again if I can help it." The reunion was gentle, careful, with a trauma counselor present to help navigate the girls' confusion about everything they'd been told versus what they were experiencing. Emma clung to Millie's hand while Sophie drew pictures, gradually warming up as the reality of her mother's presence sank in. "Are we in trouble because Daddy took us on the car ride? He said the police were bad people who wanted to hurt our family." "No, honey, you're not in trouble. The police were trying to help bring you back to people who love you safely. Daddy made some choices that weren't good for you girls, but that's not your fault." The transition took 2 weeks of careful coordination between therapists, social workers, and the court system. Derek was held without bail on kidnapping charges, while Emma and Sophie stayed with Clara during the day and had extended visits with Millie every evening. Clara had become an unexpected bridge between their old life and their new reality. She helped the girls pack their belongings and explained in age-appropriate terms why they would be living with Millie now, while still visiting Clara regularly. "You don't have to choose between loving different people," Clara told them during one of their packing sessions. "Your heart is big enough to love everyone who takes care of you." The most difficult conversation came when Emma asked directly about the night her mother was hurt. "Did Daddy really make you go to the hospital?" she asked, during a quiet moment while Sophie was napping. Millie chose her words carefully, guided by the family therapist's advice about truth without traumatization. "Daddy and I had a big fight that night, and I got hurt. I had to go to the hospital to get better. That's why I went away. Not because I didn't love you, but because I needed time to heal."
"Is that why you have that scar on your head?" Millie nodded, gently touching the small scar that was usually hidden by her hair. "Yes, but I got all better, and now I can take care of you the way mommies are supposed to." Emma processed this for a moment, then said, "I'm sorry Daddy hurt you. I'm glad you got better." The legal aftermath moved quickly. Derek was sentenced to 18 months in prison for kidnapping, with additional charges pending for the illegal recordings and parental alienation. His pharmaceutical company terminated his employment after the criminal conviction, and the house he'd bought with Clara was put up for sale to pay legal fees. But the real transformation wasn't in the legal system. It was in the small, daily moments of rebuilding trust and routine. 6 months later, Millie was sitting in the audience of Emma's school play, watching her daughter play a sunflower in the spring production. Sophie was in her lap, pointing excitedly at her sister on stage. It was the kind of ordinary moment that Millie had been denied for 3 years, now made precious by its return. "Mommy, look! Emma remembered all her lines," Sophie whispered proudly.
After the play, Emma ran off the stage and straight into Millie's arms, her yellow costume petals crushed in the enthusiastic hug. "Did you see me? Did you see my dance? I saw everything. You were perfect." Clara joined them for the post-play celebration dinner, a new tradition they'd established to help the girls understand that loving different people wasn't a betrayal of anyone. The four of them had become an unconventional but functional family unit, bonded by their shared commitment to Emma and Sophie's well-being. "I have some news," Clara announced over dessert. "I've been accepted to a graduate program in child psychology. I want to help other kids who've gone through what Emma and Sophie experienced." The girls cheered, and Millie felt a deep gratitude for the woman who had risked everything to help her daughters heal. The most significant change came in Emma and Sophie's relationship with their own story. With the help of their therapist, they had begun to understand the difference between the lies they'd been told and the love they'd always carried for their mother. "I used to think I wasn't supposed to miss you," Sophie confided to Millie during one of their bedtime conversations. "But now I know that missing someone means you love them." "That's exactly right. And you never have to hide your feelings from me, no matter what they are." Emma, who was always the more verbal of the twins, started writing letters to her father in prison with the therapist's guidance, not to forgive him, but to process her complicated feelings about loving someone who hurt their family. "I'm mad at Daddy, but I still love him. Is that okay?" "It's very okay. Love doesn't disappear just because someone makes bad choices. Your feelings belong to you, and they're all valid." A year after the custody battle, Millie received an unexpected letter from Derek in prison. It was brief, handwritten, and addressed to her alone. "Millie, I know you'll probably never forgive me, and I don't expect you to. The therapy they make us do here has helped me understand that everything I did was about controlling you, not protecting the girls. I was terrified of being alone and turned that fear into hatred. Emma and Sophie are lucky to have you as their mother. I hope someday I can be someone they're not ashamed to call their father. Derek." It wasn't an apology exactly, but it was the closest thing to acknowledgement of the truth that Derek had ever offered. Millie filed the letter away, unsure if she would ever share it with Emma and Sophie, but grateful for the confirmation that Derek was finally facing reality. The new beginning wasn't perfect or simple. Emma still had nightmares sometimes, and Sophie struggled with anxiety about people she loved disappearing. Millie dealt with her own trauma responses and the ongoing challenge of single motherhood after years of separation. But they were building something genuine together. A family based on honesty instead of manipulation, love instead of control, and truth instead of convenient lies. On a sunny Saturday morning, 2 years after the custody battle, Millie woke up to find Emma and Sophie had made her breakfast in bed. Slightly burned toast, scrambled eggs with too much salt, and orange juice with pulp floating in it. "Happy Mother's Day, real mommy," Emma said, presenting the tray with 7-year-old solemnity. "We made it all by ourselves. Sophie helped a little bit, but mostly we did it." As Millie ate the imperfect breakfast surrounded by her daughter's chatter and laughter, she realized this was what victory actually looked like. Not vindication or revenge, but the simple joy of being present for the people you love. The viral social media posts and court battles and media investigations had all been necessary to get here, but this quiet morning moment was what she had been fighting for all along. The right to be Emma and Sophie's mother, openly and without apology, for all the ordinary days ahead. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.